Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. Lawyers targeted in latest violence in Quetta, Balochistan. Military-backed charter unofficially accepted by Thai voters. Indonesian president's controversial decision to appoint General Wiranto to cabinet. India's Iram Sharmila ends 16-year fast. Indian workers facing starvation and are stranded after losing jobs in Saudi Arabia. Urgent appeal from Pakistan. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I am Julia Roblondo. This week, Just Asia begins with a senseless and brutal attack on lawyers in Quetta, Balochistan on August 8th. 97 persons were killed in the blast, including 63 lawyers and 2 journalists, the photographer of Dawn and Aj News channels, and more than 120 persons, including women and children, were injured. The attack occurred amidst a gathering to pay respects to the assassinated president of the Bar Association, Mr. Bilal Anwar Khansi. Prior to his assassination, Mr. Khansi called for a boycott of the Balochistan courts in solidarity with another lawyer who was assassinated 2 days earlier. The Asian Human Rights Commission is urging the United Nations to hold a probe into the planned killing of lawyers in Balochistan. The lawyers have been at the forefront of a campaign demanding the government to take effective action against those involved in violence in the region, which has led to many assassinations in the past few months. According to reports, immediately following the massacre, the military authorized intelligence services to make arrests as they wish throughout the country. This will clearly result in the arrest of many innocent persons, as well as many enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. Balochistan's lawyers are being targeted to silence the voices of those representing missing persons, extrajudicial killings, and abuse of power by the law enforcement agencies, including the Frontier Corps of the Pakistan Army. The FC has been in Balochistan for almost 2 decades. It has police power and checkposts all over the province. On June 8th, the principal of Quetta's Law College, Barrister Amanullah Achazai, was shot dead on August 2nd. Unknown assailants shot dead prominent lawyer Jahan Zeb Alvi. The AHRC urges lawyers from around the world to show their solidarity with the beleaguered lawyers of Pakistan at a global level, as they are being punished for fighting for their constitutional rights of the people and for striving to protect democracy. Moving to Thailand. Initial projections for the country's August 2016 referendum predict that the military-backed draft constitution will be accepted by a safe majority. On Sunday, August 7th, the referendum results showed almost 90% of the ballot had been counted. And in response to the referendum's first question, asking whether voters accepted the draft charter, 62% of voters selected yes. But the charter's acceptance rates are divided geographically. Within central Thailand, southern Thailand, and northern Thailand, voters are speculated to have accepted the charter at rates of 69%, 77%, and 58% respectively. But within the northeast regions, the historical mainstay of support for the Red Shirt movement, 51% of the voters selected no. In response to the second question, asking whether voters would approve a junta-appointed Senate to jointly vote with the House of Representatives to select the Prime Minister, about 58% of voters selected yes. Rates of approval differed from region to region once again. In the country's center, south, and north, voters allegedly approved this electoral reform at rates of 68%, 75%, and 54% respectively. But across the northeast, some 55% voters rejected the proposal. To learn more, Just Asia interviews Mr. Anon Chawalawan, Senior Officer of Documentation Center, Internet Law Reform Dialogue.
The government did not distribute the actual constitution draft. It only distributed the summary of the draft constitution to the people. And in the draft constitution, there is some message that likely to be the distortion of the actual draft itself. So the people did not have the chance to study the constitution and taking consideration by themselves. The government also used civil servants as well as territorial defense students to go into community to talk to the people about draft constitution, which we concern that whether this group of civil servants and students were actually discuss with the people about both sides of constitution, good and bad, or they just focus on the good side. So this is one of another concern. Lastly, with regard to freedom of expression, why the government can use its agency to go and talk to people about the draft constitution, but the activists and the academicians who try to campaign on vote no, to vote against the draft constitution, were limited by law. Several laws such as the referendum law itself, as well as other laws such as the order of the military junta, which prohibit the gathering of people for political activity, were used to press the charge against those who came out and campaigned. So we can actually say that this referendum is not actually a free and fair referendum.
Next, Indonesian President Joko Widodo's most controversial action in his 2-year leadership has been his recent appointment of retired Army General Wiranto to the cabinet. With his dubious human rights record, there are calls for General Wiranto to be criminally prosecuted rather than given a seat in government. Indonesia's National Commission on Human Rights has reported that in case the 1998 student shooting in Trisakti and Semanggi, General Wiranto, serving as military commander, made no attempts to stop the shooting or investigate and prosecute the perpetrators, and failed to prove whether or not he ordered the shooting. Similarly, in the May tragedy of May 1998, where thousands of Indonesian Chinese were raped, General Wiranto did not undertake any effort to stop the riots or prosecute his subordinate who ignored their riot. Furthermore, since 19 March 2004, the Dili East Timor public prosecutor has issued an arrest warrant for Wiranto regarding crimes against humanity during the East Timor referendum. Appointing such a person to be a cabinet member is a violation of President Widodo's commitment to prosecute past human rights abuses. Victims of past abuses and their families are gravely disappointed by this appointment, which only signals the strengthening of impunity in Indonesia. During the weekly Thursday black demonstrations outside the presidential palace, they are calling for the government to cancel Wiranto's appointment and bring him to the Human Rights Court.
Bagaimana tragedi Talangsari, bagaimana tragedi 65, bagaimana simpangnya ada
si Astri mana Astri? Ya, sama teman kita. Ambil.
Tapi
Cepet
sampai
ya.
hari ini pemerintah dari
Masuk,
rezim SBY, Jokowi, Megawati, Abdurrahman tidak ada itikat sedikit pun menyatakan bahwa negara telah membunuh rakyatnya. Negara hari ini telah berdosa, telah menzalimi negaranya, rakyatnya seperti sendiri. Negara berkata, negara lebih memilih dan sangat komunis di korporat daripada kita rakyat. Padahal kita tahu bahwa semua ini adalah hasil dari rakyat.
In India, activist Anon Chawalawan ended her 16-year fast on Tuesday. Begun as a protest against the controversial Armed Forces Special Powers Act in her home state of Manipur, in July 2016, Chawalawan told the media that she would continue her fight to repeal the law by joining politics instead. There have been mixed reactions to her decision, seen starkly when she was given no accommodation after being released from the hospital.
Have it. Go for it, go. Yes.
In other news from India, thousands of Indian citizens have been stranded in Saudi Arabia as they have recently lost their jobs due to the drop in oil prices and the economic downturn in the region. India's Minister for External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, has promised to do everything in her power to help the Indian citizens. It had been reported that many Indian workers were starving, facing an unprecedented food crisis as they have lost their jobs, and many have also not been paid their back wages. The Indian government swung into action and food was distributed to the starving citizens. This crisis once again draws attention to the plight of Indian migrants in the Gulf and the deplorable conditions they live in. There are frequent reports of human rights abuses faced by the migrants in Gulf countries, having been forced to work under exploitative conditions and terms of contract. The present deplorable situation has taken place despite Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Saudi Arabia and the promise of better working conditions through the signing of 5 labor-related agreements between the two nations. Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features one case from Pakistan regarding the crackdown on Sindh nationalists for holding protests on various issues such as killings of Hindus, state-backed religious extremists, anti-Sindh plans, and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Dozens of Sindh nationalists were arrested after 2 blasts near the Rangers checkpost, and their current whereabouts are unknown. A curfew was imposed in many districts of interior Sindh, and law enforcement agencies searched houses using force. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.alrc.asia/justasia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.